Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You all have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement and help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment plans to take from you. I am your host, Royce White, and I am here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode number 40 of Please Call Me Crazy. Welcome back again to everyone out there, all the new subscribers, all the new listeners. We continue to grow at a good pace. We're going to start to um, really get organized and ramp up the output of content, shorts, and other things like that that will hopefully help grow the channel at an even better pace, as well as inviting more guests on the show, both remote and in person. I really like the in-person interviews because we can control all the elements and the dynamic well. Plus, conversations are just better in person. Although I have to say, if you haven't had the chance to go see the last Family and Friends episode with Tim Gordon from this past Friday, and even the Family and Friends episode with Professor Penn on last Thursday, I would really, really encourage you to go and check those out. Both of them were great conversations. The one with Tim Gordon was exceptional in my opinion, just from a production standpoint. And, there's the conversation and the content, and then there's the consistency and flow of content and from a production standpoint. And I thought the whole thing with Tim Gordon was absolutely seamless. Partly because Tim has his own studio there, and he's very veteran in being in control of his sound and his picture quality and all of that. So that was a fantastic interview. But we're going to start to ramp that up. So don't be shocked if you see episodes drop on certain days that are not on the normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. That's just because we're trying to get more content out. And in order to get more content, we have to open our scheduling up to accommodate more people's schedule. And we'll be able to get that content out. What I don't want to do is have a conversation this week and then put it out 3 weeks from now. That you don't want that. I don't want that. You don't want that. We want the conversation to be somewhat relevant to the time. I already don't like to have a conversation on Tuesday and then put that out on Friday. So we're going to start to take a look at that and get organized in a number of other ways to make the content better, make it more easy, make it easier to get out to you in all the many forms and formats it needs to. With that being said, um, another piece of housekeeping is I'm very, very confident that Chris Martinson will be appearing as a friend in the next couple of episodes in a week or weeks to come. And I'm also very confident that we are going to get the great Jack Posobiec on the podcast in the very near future. And some other people as well. A lot of names coming, so stay tuned for that. We appreciate everybody who's here, viewing or listening, and continue to share, continue to like and subscribe to the channel and share the channel, share the content if you get a chance. We'll be putting out some more shorts and things like that in the weeks to come. We're behind on, well, we haven't really put out mini shorts at all, which is the the number one way to grow a channel uh, in today's social media is the clip format, the small clip, the 60-second clip, or even shorter than that. That's what Gary V, kind of coined, or people have coined the TikTokification of social media, which we don't mind. We think we do a decent enough job in conveying the message in great sound bites that encapsulate the overall spirit of what we're trying to discuss on the podcast. And we look forward to getting out 60-second shorts, and that's what we'll be trying to do. So that, and we're behind with clips about 15 episodes, which just kind of got away from us in the scramble of everything. But we're going to get that remedied and get the clips caught up. Also, we do have a channel. I do have my own channel now on band.video that was established last week. So all the podcasts, even the ones that have been censored, will obviously be available on band.video. And we plan to have Alex Jones back on. We never did get a great response from Alex from YouTube as to why our Alex Jones episode was removed. If you didn't see that interview, I strongly encourage you to go see that interview on Rumble. It's still up on Rumble. You can find it there. Go watch the interview on Rumble. And know that we're going to have Alex Jones back on the podcast, both on Rumble and on Band.video, my channel there. I don't even know why my episode with Alex was taken down, to be honest. Alex has, I don't know, three or four podcasts up with Rogan on YouTube still today, and they didn't remove those because of any politics or lawsuits or cyberbullying as they defined it to us. So I'm not sure why my interview was taken down. Maybe because Alex Jones went deeper than maybe he's ever gone before in our interview. And again, I encourage you to go listen to that because he really did, reveal in a very passionate way um, some more inner dilemmas, inner conflicts, inner thoughts that I had not seen him share before in any interviews. So, with that being said, let's get into today's episode. We talked a lot about foreign policy over the last. We talked a lot about national policy or American policy as it pertains to us domestically, domestic policy over the last week. Not beholden to my laying out a platform of my future political campaigns of which will be term limits, no taxes, reparations, and huge controversy around reparations. And hopefully today I get to tie in our topic for today into the pitch for reparations at some point. And I love the controversy. I love the controversy. I love the opposition to the reparations proposal. I love it. I love it. It provides the opportunity in the stew to show the gaping holes in people's understanding of the current American political landscape and the policy that presides over us today. Um, but that's the American Jubilee, and I'm going to be running my next political campaign on this American Jubilee concept again. Term limits. We got to stop letting politicians be career politicians. Even myself, I don't plan to be a politician for 30, 40 years and become a millionaire by doing so. And then the taxes. Taxes has become a scam and leviathan, unimaginable, I'm sure, by the founding fathers, or they probably did imagine it, which is why they made explicit remarks about taxation. In fact, the rebellion or the revolt against the crown was greatly had to do with taxation, which many revolts and rebellions are. The taxes in America today are just completely out of control. And even furthermore, the use of our tax money is patently corrupt. And then reparations is one where we have historical reconciliation that not only should be made, but can be made in a way that both benefits the American people across the board, regardless of race, and really starts to chip away at a huge, huge problem that we have in this country regarding manufacturing, American manufacturing. So I'll get to that and much more with the American Jubilee as the weeks go on, and sort of lay out the fine points of how we should go about applying certain ideas in a real tangible way. But today I want to talk a little bit more about foreign policy because our foreign policy is way out of control. I mean, fruit from the same poisonous tree, no doubt. But the foreign policy is far and away subversive. I mean, it borders on treason. I mean, it really does. I don't want. I'm not saying that to be exaggerant or trying to embellish or be an alarmist, but our foreign policy is by many metrics treasonous. Okay, and we're going to talk today about foreign policy. And we can't have a conversation about foreign policy without talking about the great dragon of the East, China, because it is our most pressing threat in the world today. And I want to talk about what it means, what that threat really looks like, what it means that it's a threat, and hopefully we can start to build a dialogue that can reach out to people, even slowly but surely, about the threat that we face there with China and the many corrupt players that are playing on all sides of the field in order to either preserve the conflict for their own gain, trying to further the agenda to be China centric, or trying to double down on America's historical shortcomings morally, ethically, that will ultimately either lead to preserving the status quo or lead to a China-centric world governance. But first, I want to play a video for you. I found this video online, and it's of some African man spokesperson. I don't know who he is exactly, but certainly speaking on behalf of African nations, and he's speaking on behalf of Africans in general and the history of Africa as it relates to China versus Russia and America in this 4-player jump ball. I want you to take a listen to this, and then we'll continue.
BRICS is a good thing. Kill the American dollar. You come to me, you want to buy gold, and then you give me papers, and then you call that business. No. And right now the economy is running on the false idea of Nixon, who removed the American dollar from being gold-based to being paper-based. So Americans don't need any backup for their economy. Or they're going to go to a photocopying machine and photocopy more papers. We are going to be reaching a time right now in Zimbabwe where all the gold that was stolen by the Europeans is going to come back to Africa. How? When we sell you our maize, we sell you our flowers, we sell you our coal. We don't want some damn pieces of paper money in our accounts. Pay in gold. Bring it back from your reserves in London, in Lisbon, in New York, in Frankfurt. You want iron ore and manganese. You want bars of gold.
Let's play it again. One more time from the beginning.
BRICS is a good thing. Kill the American dollar. You come to me, you want to buy gold, and then you give me papers, and then you call that business. No. And right now the economy is running on the false idea of Nixon, who removed the American dollar from being gold-based to being paper-based. So Americans don't need any backup for their economy. Or they're going to go to a photocopying machine and photocopy more papers. We are going to be reaching a time right now in Zimbabwe where all the gold that was stolen by the Europeans is going to come back to Africa. How? When we sell you our maize, we sell you our flowers, we sell you our coal. We don't want some damn pieces of paper money in our accounts. Pay in gold. Bring it back from your reserves in London, in Lisbon, in New York, in Frankfurt. You want iron ore and manganese. You want bars of gold.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can't talk about foreign policy in America or anywhere without talking about the situation with the economy. And much of foreign policy is based on the global economy, and the global economy is based on our currency and the currency system. And, going right back to episode 1, 2, 3, 4, if you're not familiar, if you just joined the podcast, please, I beg you, go back to the first episodes and listen just to understand that this is the track we've been laying out now for the last 60 days since the podcast started. And right away, I've been on the record. The Federal Reserve, the Bretton Woods Conference, World War II, Nixon, the gold standard, the entire thing, the post-World War II democratic liberal order was just as much of a restructuring of of the global financial system as it was the military hegemony. And what you're seeing right here is two primary things. One is Africa as a continent is going to be used in an information war. It's going to be used as a tool of propaganda from the BRICS countries versus the traditional Western hegemony. And that's us, that includes us here in America. And they're going to be used in a very simple, strategic way. You white Europeans colonized Africa. You colonized it. You engaged in the European monarchy business model, specifically from the crown. But when we say the crown, or when I say the crown, yes, I'm talking about the British Empire, but I'm also talking about a European monarchical tradition where many European empires, as they fought amongst each other in the white-on-white violence of the Middle Ages, of the post-Renaissance era, so on and so forth, they also took time to venture out and colonize other places. Now, is this a wholesale indictment against white people all over the world? No, that's ridiculous. People who talk like that should just shut the fuck up. I mean, they're really not serious enough to be talking about things in this time with any seriousness. Although it does seem that the algorithm would like to promote such people. This man happens to be one of them, and I'll tell you why. Now, he's not the dumbest of the dumb. He's not exceptionally stupid. He understands the fundamentals of the game that has been played. What he is being used is how Africa as a whole will be used in the future to say Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are the remedy to the Western hegemony. But it's a lie. It's a scam. Okay. And we're going to get into that here throughout the podcast today. But that's one way that he's being used. The second way that it's being used is to pretend like um, that America's economic hegemony, America's hegemony in the world wasn't something that all these African countries sold out to. It's the same story that's told about slavery, that black people didn't have a choice, that Africans didn't have a choice. It's the same thing that's being done now. The African nations never had a choice. They were corrupted. They were forced into this economic Ponzi scheme at the tip of a spear. And they were. In some ways, they were. But you still have a choice. And that's the duality of free will. That's the peak, that's the height of duality and free will that's now on display, where people have a choice to be free or be slaves. And when you choose to be a slave, you incur certain culpability in any retrospective examination of your history. And that is what Africa was forced at the tip of a spear. Bunch of little third world countries or underdeveloped countries, countries that weren't necessarily modernized militarily, economically, infrastructurally, and so on and so forth. Yeah, the West came in after World War II, restructured the entire economic system, and they gave Africa the short end of the stick. Yeah, that's usually how it goes in business, and that. There's moral hazard in that, and now the moral hazard is going to come to rebound back on America, the American dollar, and virtually, I mean, in effect, the American people. Yeah, yeah. And guess what? The same thing was done to many of you at home. The same way that the African nations were forced into a financial scam is the same way many of you at home have been forced into a taxation scam at the tip of a spear. And many of you will admit that you were forced into a taxation scam at the tip of a spear. Or many of you will admit that you were forced into an interest rate taxation scam at the tip of a spear. But you won't accept it from the African nations, and the African nations won't accept their own culpability. Everybody wants to point the finger. And in pointing the finger, we miss very, very, very essential information, very essential perspective on what's being proposed. What's being proposed from all sides. And let's get down to the basis here. We have a 4-player jump ball. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it until you understand. This is the predominant geopolitical situation. We have a 4-player jump ball. We have the crown, the globalists. These are the European monarchs. They were the ones that decided and perpetrated much of this economic Ponzi scheme, this business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy on third world places like Africa, but all across the world, in Asia, in South America. Okay. We got Russia, ethno-nationalist dictatorship. Okay. We got China, ethno-nationalist dictatorship. We have the globalists, who are international dictatorships, is an international dictatorship. And then we have the free people of the world. You, me, all the people who sit under this governance. It used to be when people would revolt, they were revolt against a certain monarch, a king. Well, there aren't individual kings anymore. And anybody who tries to give you an individual face to hang your hat of resent and rejection and rebellion on is lying to you. That's propaganda, right? Not the truth, not complete lies Sometimes it's lies, but sometimes it's half truth, and sometimes it's the truth out of context. And if anybody gives you an individual scapegoat, they're obscuring your vision of the bigger picture. And they're banking on the fact that you would much rather opt for an individual scapegoat than you would the broadness and totality of the problem that we face as free people. I'm not going to bastardize your intelligence that way. I'm not going to insult your intelligence that way. That's not what we're about here at Free People Radio. That's why I wouldn't run my campaign on a literary basis of a fifth grade reading level. I said if the American people can't come to understand the spirit of somebody telling them the truth, then we could never have a vote that's really genuine. The entire wide body of politic in American culture, anywhere where they practice a democratic process, is bastardized and undermined if we speak to our people through an insult of their intelligence. And despite the many differences that we in America have with a Russia or a China, the one thing that you can say on behalf of their leaders is that they are very transparent with their people. That their political system, their political propaganda, their political language and jargon does not run on the basis of lies. Partly because their culture comes from a very poverty-stricken culture. Their culture is one where the masses of people come from poverty-strickenness. So they don't feel the need. They have a sort of uniformity of understanding about the bare necessities, the fundamentals of the situation, and they assess them well. And the people do at a wide range. The people in China there, they know when President Xi comes and he talks about the hegemony of the West, they know what he means. When Russia says we don't want NATO on the Russian people they know what he means. It's the American people. It's us, the American people, who are supposed to be this bastion of freedom that have become accustomed to propaganda as the means of political communication. And we've accepted it. And there's moral hazard in that. But we have this 4-player jump ball. And what they're going to do now is one of two things. The globalists are going to allow, foster, and even promulgate an anti-American sentiment, an anti-Western sentiment that will get categorized or will get summarized in an anti-American sentiment. And this is why I go back to bringing up World War II, because we have to separate ourselves from these people. We have to separate ourselves from the European monarchies. We have to separate ourselves from the crimes of of colonialism. We pretended like we did after World War II, but that was a Marxist academia trick. That the entire anti-colonial movement up until this point, after World War II, you could argue, was nothing more than a rebranding, a marketing rebranding of the Crown's business model. The Crown co-opted cultural and social Marxism. They co-opted it. It allowed for everybody to join in on the rebranding of the business model. And that's what this man is trying to imply. He's saying, and there's another interview where you can see African people say, don't bring us LGBTQ theory. Don't bring us LGBTQ curriculums and think that that's compensation for our natural resources. Don't bring us social justice, democracy, and environmentalism, which was the rebrand. Understand. Understand. Piracy, democracy. Slavery, social justice. And the drug trade, environmentalism. I mean, they go hand in hand. That was the rebrand of the Crown's business model. Formerly, slavery, drugs, piracy. After World War II, after this sort of co-opt of Marxism and these other we are the world sort of global initiatives, then it became social justice, democracy, and environmentalism. And that's been the prevailing ideology up until now. And now people are fed up with it. People are saying not only is the game not being run in a genuine manner, You guys are the main perpetrators or contradictors or hypocrites in the game. And they're not going to take it anymore. Or at least they're going to try their best to fight back, which will preempt either war and conflict and actual bloodshed, or it'll create the opportunity or the circumstance for America or the Western leaders to concede America's position as a bastion of freedom. This is what you saw during the Civil War. The Civil War took two different positions on slavery, but the real position underneath the Civil War that was most integral, you could say, is about states' rights, right? And the two get conflated because the Confederacy, which most people view historically as being on the wrong side of the Civil War, were trying to protect and fight for states' rights. And the Union was protecting against state rights. They wanted to have a more federalized government. But it was the slavery that became the calling card of the Civil War. Even how we're taught today. Am I lying, Tanner? When you're taught the Civil War, the predominant narrative is that the Civil War was fought about slavery. At least from a cultural standpoint, at least in spirit, right? I'm not saying that they don't teach anything else about the Civil War. And they even teach you the details, but think about how it's portrayed at mass. At mass, it's portrayed that the North fought against the South to free the slaves. That's not true. The North fought against the South to create a more federalized government and a very, very sophisticated political battle between states that became a political battle between the Union and the Confederacy about states' rights versus federal government. And in winning and abolishing slavery, we gave up a bunch of states' rights. That's how the devil plays. We have to understand that now. And that was the pilot. Understand this. Weaving a much broader political, a much broader political war, an asymmetrical political war, and nestling that beneath a huge cultural issue that's very visceral and visible, like slavery, that was a pilot, and they're going to do it now. And this is what this man is saying. America, the West, created a fiat currency system. A fiat currency system that is largely it's a scam. I mean, let's just be honest. The entire international banking system is a huge scam. Okay, that's why that we're what is it, $4 quadrillion of debt there is out there. Okay, and just in America alone, we have 173 trillion dollars in unfunded liabilities. Okay, I think there's like $4 quadrillion of global bank debt. I mean, we live in a debt society now. Everybody want to say, "Hey, look, we print money." We print money based on future what they did was they used a scientific method. They used science and the ability to build things as a backstop or a front to be able to create money to put people in debt for things that they could build that would then surely come to exist, right? Here are the plans. Here are the geometrical drawings or here are the architectural designs of building A. And building A should be able to yield at this much money. Here, this should be the worth of building A. This is the ancillary business that can come around building A or a city full of, and we're going to build and build and build and build and build. And yeah, absolutely. Those things bring real tangible value. They are a product and they are in many ways productive to society. But the usury, the debt that's incurred, the debt that was incurred on the back of this entire build seems to be disproportionate to the actual value. And one can deduce that very simply because these buildings are there and whatever they were said to have been able to generate on paper, they either haven't generated or they have generated and somebody wanted more money than they were actually worth. And that's where capitalism, which is another herald of American politics on both sides of the aisle, but predominantly conservatives, that's where capitalism became crony and corrupt capitalism and kind of got away from us, right? We wanted a kickback bigger and we wanted a kickback that wasn't reasonable. That's become the calling card of capitalism. And that criticism of capitalism and crony capitalism and corrupt capitalism isn't an affirmation of socialism, and it isn't an affirmation of communism. But we have to deal with we can't continue to walk about as though there are no pitfalls of capitalism and not deal with those in a real way. Because every time we obfuscate a conversation about capitalism in some cheap manner, we add ammunition for the Marxists. We add ammunition for the socialists and the communists. We have to deal with this. Something went wrong here, gravely wrong, gravely, gravely wrong. And maybe no place bigger than in Africa, who first suffered a slave trade where many Africans sold their own people out. Let's be honest. Okay, if you come to my house with a gun or a spear and you say, "Give us your children, give us your nieces and nephews, give us your distant cousins who you don't know that well or don't really like, or give us your next door neighbor for a price," I'm going to say no, and I'm going to fight that battle, and I'm willing to die there. And you have to be willing for all of your relatives to die as well. There was a metaphysical and spiritual lap in the idea of bondage and slavery that the early Africans that orchestrated the slave trade probably either didn't understand or they were just corrupt themselves and said, "Hey, well, go ahead, take them." Maybe they already had people enslaved, and they'll tell you a story that they were tricked and they were this and they were lied to, and I kind of just find that hard to believe because people want to say they're being lied to now. And you are being lied to, but in some ways, they're telling you exactly what it is. We're going to make you a slave. We're going to make you eat bugs. We're going to make you live in a 15-minute city. We're going to make all of your transactions viewable by the government. We're going to add 80,000 IRS agents. We're going to. They're telling you. And then they'll have one spokesperson like a Stephen Colbert or Don Lemon, now smoked, formerly Don Lemon of CNN. They'll have him come out and say, "No, this is for your good. This is all for you." Henry Kissinger, "This is all for the betterment of humanity." Yuval Noah Harari, "This is all for the progress of the species." But they're telling you exactly what it is, right? So I find it hard to believe if we look across time at any group of people that there was this lack of knowledge. We come back to that same question: were they ignorant to it or were they in on it? 9 times out of 10, people are in on it. If they're not in on it directly, they're in on it at a subconscious level. They're in on it at a spiritual level. Their own spiritual will isn't clarified, and that lack of clarity makes them susceptible to be co-opted by other wicked players. Early Africa was probably an example of that, and that doesn't absolve white Europeans of the slave trade or their role in it. It doesn't absolve anybody. One person's sins do not absolve another person's sins. Only grace and forgiveness and repentance can absolve you of your sins. And we play this zero-sum game like, well, they sinned first, so our sin doesn't count, or they sinned in this way, and then that affected our sin, so our sin is a sin is a sin is a sin, right? The only absolution from sin comes through God, which many of these groups that I'm talking about work together now to undermine the legitimacy of, in unison, right? The God part is out. So the absolution of the sin is out. And we're going to play a game of who sinned greater. Yeah. Whose sin was worse. We should rightfully be willing to die for freedom. Should die to oppose and resist bondage, the bondage of slavery. But there was physical slavery, and then there was wage slavery. Then there was currency and fiat currency slavery. Global economic monetary system and policy slavery. And this was the second scam to befall Africa as a continent and many African nations. Not only did they endure physical slavery and bondage, then in the Reconstruction, as the Crown rebranded its business model and said, "Hey, social justice, democracy, and environmentalism," social justice, democracy, and environmentalism. Now, the African nations get the short end of the stick in this reformed monetary system, Bretton Woods Conference. And then finally, the great Richard Nixon, okay, the sine qua non of global rhino, all right, the sine qua non rhino, he dealt the death blow to the whole deal by taking us off the gold standard. Taking us off the gold standard was really just an arrogant way, a narcissistic way to say, hey, America's got more to offer than all you other shit nations. Okay. All you other shit nations, you take a paper, you take an IOU, and we'll get you when we can. Okay. We'll deal with you. Whatever we're giving you, just to be in business with us is a blessing in and of itself, right? We don't have to transfer anything tangible back to you in our dealings. And in fact, and many times when we get the chance, we'll rape you in the deal because that's just capitalism. Capitalism is a Darwinist economic formation. It really is, guys. We got to cut the shit. Now, capitalism guided by faith in God and morals and ethics could be a very, very productive and effective economic system. But capitalism without God is just Darwinism economics. That's all it is. Every man for himself. And not only every man for himself, every man that can provide the most visceral and convenient jerk off and dopamine high for the nearest consumer. That's why they talk about location, location, location. Location, location, location isn't a sign of values or ethics or morals. Location is, I have a corner, I can get dope to my consumer on that corner quicker. Guys, we have to be brave enough to address these things. We have to be brave enough to say what they were, what they weren't, and what they will, can, and need to be. We have to do that now. And any leader who isn't willing to do that, they're a pussy. They're a pussy. They're not really leading you. They just want to step up to the mic, step up to the podium, and get whatever it is they can get from being in a position of power at the time. It's very capitalist, very Darwin-like, okay? We have to fundamentally address the way that this nation has gone about its business. And the economy is going to suffer a very, very dire hardship because of the way we've gone about our business. And the question is, will we soften the landing by clarifying our will? Can we do that? I think we can. But when an African man says, hey, we don't want any more pieces of paper for our natural resources, pay us in gold. Well, number one, he's getting a little bit ahead of himself, and I'll speak to that now. I know we're about 40 minutes in, and I went on a 30-minute rant there, but this is the reality. I mean, this is what we. If you don't understand, please take the time to go back through and listen closely. I think I'm doing as succinct a job as I can, but like Alex Jones says often, there's so much stuff going on. I'm trying to give you the pieces of it as I can and give them to you on the fly in context, because there's so many issues and they're so broad, but I'm trying to give you them in context of one another. So you can start to formulate a way to see a London Times headline and then go read the Wall Street Journal and then go read the Iran and Saudi agreement and go, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. I see what's going on here. When the Africans start to say, you have to pay us now in gold. First off, they're getting way ahead of themselves, because before you say that, you got to be ready to fight. What he's not admitting is that had Africa been in a dominant position against its opponents at that time, they would have more likely been more quick to fight off taking a bad deal. But the prospect of war and the prospect of death often mediates the interactions and dealings of business at the geopolitical level, for sure. In American corporations, it's law fair, okay? Whose attorneys are better, right? Patents and intellectual properties and so on and so forth. But it's still a form of war. Warfare, the proposition of war often mediates the terms and conditions with which business is done. So the Africans at that time, although they got a shitty deal and it was a predatory deal and the deal was premeditated, no doubt, had their armies or their civilization been more sophisticated at the time, they wouldn't have took that deal. They would have fought. They didn't fight. A lot of them didn't fight. They signed a deal instead of fighting. And now they want the world to believe that they're going to restructure the deal and not be prepared to fight. No, what they're actually saying is we're going to sign on to a big homie, as we would call it in the neighborhood. They want a new big homie. And this is moral hazard for the African nations. And this is the moral pitfall of what this man is saying. And this is the moral pitfall of black people. And this is the moral pitfall of the Pan-African movement. You hate America so much. You hate white Europeans so much. You hate whiteness so much. It's such a big boogeyman that now you think Russia and China are going to come save the day. And particularly China. Because when you talk about Africa, let's be clear. Russia's not recolonizing and resettling Africa. It's China. So to bring Russia into the conversation is dishonest at best. Malicious, really, more or less. Because really it's China that's resettling Africa. Okay. Do we really believe that the Chinese are paying African nations in gold? No, of course not. They're not paying African nations in gold. What they've done is they've weaponized the psychology of their people into a more labor and work and productivity-driven mindset. And so they can exchange labor and production and manufacturing for natural resources. Old school barter system. You give us your gold and we'll give you an airport. You give us your lithium and we'll give you roads. You give us your X and we'll give you Y. But it's not gold that they're paying. And the African nations know that. So this whole rant that this guy went on is dishonest at a fundamental level. The Chinese aren't paying in gold. That's a lie. Okay, so when he says, oh, well, the gold's coming back to Africa, from where? From Europe. Maybe so what he's proposing is that when the Europeans and the Americans want Africa's resources, that they should come get the resources and they should be made to pay in gold. A reversal, a reverse engineering of what Nixon did is what he's saying. And this is, Kissinger Nixon. It's like the well that never runs dry of moral hazard for the American people and the American dollar. I mean, the ramifications just continue to pile on, right? But the Chinese are resettling Africa, and they're not going to pay them in gold. They're going to pay them in airports. They're going to pay them in roads. They're going to pay them in cities. They're going to pay them in whatever means of labor that they can offer up, which is all going to become a military footprint. And this is the other thing what they're doing is they're trading one slave master for another. Yeah, no, the Bretton Woods Conference and the entire monetary policy that came after World War II was corrupt and it was predatory and it was meant to enslave all free people under an economic hegemony. There's no doubt about that. The answer is not to go to another player who wants to do the exact same thing in their own name. And that's exactly who the CCP is. And the African nations would be fools to believe that the CCP is going to build them a bunch of roads and airports and cities and not come and use them as a military footprint to dominate them first and foremost, but advance their dominance over the entire Eurasian landmass. The Afro-Eurasian landmass, the world island, Mackinder's geographical pivot of history, the heartland, the world island, the Eurasian world island, the Afro-Eurasian world island, 50% of the natural resources on the planet, on the world island. That's what they're doing. And once it's secure enough, once they have enough guns and infrastructure built and rapport with Africa and African nations, all they're going to do is turn their guns on the African people and demand a better price. Because the Chinese are masters of price. They're the ultimate Marxists. They're the ultimate expression of Marxism. Their whole game is about price. I love when Chris Martinson on our first podcast we did with the great Chris Martinson, he said that a Chinese man told him at a UN summit that um, the business of America is war, the business of China is business. They've been in 100-year economic war with us that we weren't even aware of. In fact, we, in some cases, went in and gave them a boost. We have to recondition the entire American mind around labor and production. And America was the first stone to drop. Go back to the Civil War. We talked about slavery. The entire idea about slavery and production was obscured by the history of by slavery. The entire view about production and labor was obscured by the history of slavery, where the American and Western mind views a hard day's work as slave labor. It became synonymous. In China, they don't view the work that they do as slave labor. They view it as living or dying, as survival. Ultimate Darwinists. Darwin, Marx. They got, you know what Darwin and Marx provide the ingredients for? The ultimate totalitarian regime. A government that has a police station every couple of square miles there in China. And not only do they have a police station every couple of square miles, not only do they have a surveillance camera now for every 4 people in their country in the major metropolitan areas, surveillance camera for every 4 people, their own camera. And they're going to keep building because it doesn't take anything for them to build cameras. I mean, it really just doesn't. They don't even need more than that because they don't plan to be very specific in how they apply technology to administer justice. Okay, they don't really plan. That's not a huge point of emphasis, right? The Chinese, the CCP, the Constitution of the Chinese Communist Party is not so big on justice. The idea of justice, that's an American concept. So all you social justice warriors better get your fucking head screwed on right when it comes to your allegiance or your soft allegiance to the CCP out of this anti-American sentiment. You're fucking fooling yourselves, but you're not fooling me because I know you're not so interested in justice here in America. That's a scam, and it's a transatlantic scam that you got running about justice, and it's old, and it's getting old, and black people are getting tired of it. And they're going to wake up to it. But I'm worried about this African perspective because it throws this sort of nostalgic historical wrench in there. It's like, oh, the African people were taken advantage of by Europe and by way America. So if you're anti-slavery, you have to be anti-America. If you're anti-slavery, you have to be but we'll make a little exception for Europe and all the Finocchios that live there in France. We'll make an exception for the French Finocchios. We'll make an exception for the Italian Finocchios. We'll make an exception for the Austrian Finocchios, right? We'll make an exception for Europe because, I mean, hey, it's Europe, right? It's the height of civilization. The heart of Turkey longs for Vienna, okay? We have this weird infatuation with European culture. And I'm not saying that Europe didn't give us some great things in human civilization, but I'm saying it's not good enough to get fucked on a deal over and over and over and over. We are where we are. Do we really believe that the Europeans have richer intellectual grasp onto? I mean, you get to a point where you're at a point, if you get my point. You get to a point where we're at a point now. It's like what was the last thing that the Europeans invented that was far and cry better than America? Tell me. I mean, what has Europe given us that is so awe-inspiring? I mean, I know they got people there, and at the CERN Center, trying to collide atoms, trying to, what are they doing? They're ramming atoms together at the speed of light to try and recreate the Big Bang in hopes that it will give us some insight into the origins of the universe, right? These people are fucking psychotic. These people are suicidal, okay? I mean, that's suicidal. What would make somebody want to try and recreate the Big Bang? I mean, as though that wouldn't be hyper destructive in the very best case scenario. It'd be very destructive for the immediate people that live there. But hey, fuck it. You know, gain of function, if we want to tinker with the virus, if there's a leak and it kills a million people, fuck it. That's what we need to do in order to progress as a species, as civilization, in order to fight off the eventual doom of death because we don't believe in God. We don't believe in an afterlife. So the only thing we can think to do is sacrifice people in the hopes that we can prolong life at a later stage in the game. Wow, that's anti-human as fuck. That's who these people are. But no, never know. I digress. Okay. I digress. The anti-American sentiment is being propagandized all through social media. And I'm watching it. And I just ask myself, where do you fucking morons think you're headed? Where are you going? You think you're going to live? I saw Andrew Bustamante, the former CIA spy. I saw him do an interview again. I'm very big right now on watching I love the Sean Ryan show. I'm trying to catch Bustamante. I want to know how the people who are actually on the inside of the military industrial complex think. And I want to explain to you why that's so important in a little bit. But anyway, I caught Andrew Bustamante and they asked him what his plan was if China assumed a dominant role in world governance. If we in fact lost a war to China, what was his plan? Or basically if America collapsed, okay, the dollar collapsed and by way of America collapsed. Well, the first thing that he's not saying is if America collapsed because of the dollar, it would only mean that our political leaders not only allowed it to collapse, but they actually allowed the scam of the global fiat currency system to hold its corrupt bullshit narrative all the way to the hyperinflation and standard of living crisis of people here in America. Because there really is no crisis of currency. There really is no crisis. And I'll get to that in a moment. But I heard him say that his plan was for him and his wife to go live in Europe. And they would hide. And they would hide and they would hide amongst the people because a European passport would be much less hostile or it would be much less threatening than an American passport in that type of situation. He would go live in Europe, a European Finocchio, of course, right? He would go live in Europe because in Europe it would take a long time for the healthcare system to crash to meet the level of crisis of the currency, the financial collapse, right? It would take a long time for the health system to crash at the rate that the financial system crashes, which is actually true, but it's just the whole thing is way off base, okay? And I'm going to explain to you how in a moment. So they're going to make a little exception for Europe, right? America's the bad guy, but Europe, we all have this little hard on for the crown, right? Or is it that the crown is been in war or is it that we've never stopped fighting a war with the crown? Or is it that the crown never forgave us from defecting from the crown? And if you look at history, if you look throughout history, there's no greater upset in human civilization than the birth of this nation as a defection from the most powerful empire in human history. That's the oldest beef. People got to understand. The oldest beef is between America and the crown. That's the sine qua non of the entire geopolitical landscape here. The amount of land that the crown had colonized, unmatched in human history. Not Alexander, not the Persians, not the Romans, none of them. Didn't even come close. The amount of crown, the amount of land, the amount of places that the crown colonized was unequaled until America caught the crown with their back against the wall against another European continental power, Germany, in World War II, and made them transfer their colonial footprint to America on paper, the Atlantic Charter. But they never forgave. And they too, like the Chinese and the Russians, they don't forget and they don't forgive. But they're much more crafty. They will leech on. They're not principled. These people don't believe in God. Okay? They don't, but they will latch on to whatever necessary force they need to preserve their own anti-spiritual existence. And I shouldn't even say it's anti-spiritual because in many ways it's very spiritual. It's just satanic. But they will do whatever they need. The satanic spiritual existence is a very worldly and fleshly spiritual existence. And they will do anything they need to preserve that existence. So they'll leech on to people who you would think are their enemies. But really, they're playing many steps ahead. Do you think it's by accident that the entire globalist movement, the entire globalist narrative is a pro-China centric narrative? Do you think it's by accident that a European intellectual tradition sees its ultimate expression in a CCP and the Chinese manifesto? And for that matter too, communist Russia. Guys, I don't know how else to spell it out for you. They're using Russia and China. And maybe those two don't even know they're being used. Because I know many of us surely don't know we're being used. And this African man who's speaking on behalf of African nations, he sure as fuck doesn't understand or isn't willing to acknowledge that he's being used. People are being used. You're getting played. America's getting played. We don't need, first of all, America doesn't need to collapse. The dollar doesn't need to collapse. The idea that we need some product that's manufactured or mined or resourced from some place across the ocean was the initial part of the scam. We don't need it. That's a lie. We don't need the metals from Africa. We don't need the wheat from the Ukraine. We don't need the manufactured goods from China. We've been conditioned and habituated to need those goods, but we don't need them. If the American people would turn their perspective, would accept the situation that we're in, we don't need these people for anything. Remember, we got brought into World War II as an isolationist power. All this interconnect, aside from the slave trade, okay, and again, slavery, drugs. Yeah, the drugs, opium, this was coming from other places. Do we need opium? I don't know. A lot of drug addicts would say, yeah, we need the opium. That's a problem. We don't need these people. We don't need these people, and we don't need their war. And we don't need their China-centric world governance. And what we really don't need, and what we really should be in protest of, is the African nations getting co-opted by the CCP. And if you have an African leader out there that's telling you, oh yeah, we invite the BRICS. We invite the BRICS, like this guy's saying. We invite the BRICS. Give me a fucking break, buddy. Give me a fucking break. The CCP ain't paying you no gold. Who you think you fooling? This is just like the black bourgeoisie here in America saying the Democrat Party's going to pay us in whatever. It's the exact same scam. It's the exact same scam from the exact same people. That's what's, and they'll put a black man out there who will make all these poignant observations about the history of things and the current, it all adds up until you start to really pull it apart, right? Russia and China, they're going to come save the day for Africa now. No, Africa needs to save itself. And saving itself isn't cutting a deal with the new devil. If Africa wants to pull away from America, if Africa wants to pull away from colonialism, if Africa wants to pull away from the crown and the European monarchies, go ahead and do so. I encourage it. Be self-sufficient. But it dawns on me that all you fucking African nations that want to want to stand on this pedestal of self-righteousness are about 1/4 as righteous as you claim to be. Because when Gaddafi said we should have a United States of Africa, you sellout motherfuckers opposed him. When Gaddafi tried to organize the African Union to have one African currency and create the United States of Africa, you sellout motherfuckers opposed him. And you Pan-African grifting motherfuckers on social media, you motherfuckers sat there and watched Hillary Clinton and Obama kill Gaddafi for that proposal, and you still ran behind the Democrat Party on the auspices of social justice, democracy, and environmentalism. So your claims of self-righteousness aren't what they seem to be. And I understand I'm going to have trouble growing as a channel because many of my podcasts involve the self-indictment of the would-be viewer. But I don't really give a fuck. That's what real leadership is. We got to sort these things out now. I don't believe you. I don't believe these African nations who want to use this huge African history of genuine oppression and predatory business practice to now say they're going to give over the new Africa to the Chinese Communist Party. Get the fuck out of it. Go fuck yourself, buddy. Go fuck yourself. The Chinese ain't paying you in nothing but IOUs, and IOUs for them turned into I own you. They do it to their own people in China. What makes you think you're going to be any different? The Chinese oppress their own people in China. You think that they're making that they're going to backstab you the first chance they get. And when they get in a position of power, you'll just start disappearing. No, if the people of Africa want a level of independence and self-sufficiency, I invite it. I even think America should help them. But let's help them under genuine auspices. Let's not help them for their natural resources. Let's not help them to try and swindle them out of some deal in some capitalist mania. Let's go in there and help Africa become a bastion of freedom and Christianity and God and conservative values. Let's do that. And let's do it genuinely this time. And we need to do that. And if you remember a few podcasts back, I said we should have propped up Africa as the first line of defense against the CCP. And it's India right now. And India, because they're more nationalist, India's nationalist as well. And they got the people, and they're their own monster, no doubt. 1.2 billion people. They're a force to reckon with. But Africa would have been even better. Africa would be great in addition to. We could have done that. We could still do that. There's a prospect in that. Let Africa become self-sufficient. Let Africa become a buffer between. Let Africa become a buffer between the East and the West. Great. That's fantastic. Great. Bunch of Christian nations in there. Bunch of Muslim nations in there. Still a bunch of African Jews, although many African Jews live in Israel, but you'd be surprised how many black Jews there are in the world. Every time I say it, people are surprised and shocked. They're like, black Jews, what are you talking about? Yeah, there's 600,000 Jewish Ethiopian Jews. Yeah. 600,000 Moroccan Jews. Yeah. Haile Selassie, remember? Bob Marley, Rastafari. I mean, our vision of the world is so elementary. It's so prepubescent. It really is. We have no clue. And because you have no clue, you can't tell which leaders come up to the podium and say anything that would be relevant to any of these world matters. They sell you the 5th grade reading level shit that they think you'll buy. And many of you do buy it. And many of you black people buy it. But you say you care about Africa. And you African people buy what the CCP is saying. But you say you care about Africa. Or you say you care about justice. You don't. You're all in and about willing to sell out to the CCP. You're willing to sell out to the highest bidder, to the highest material bidder, to the bidder who can bring price down to the bring the price the lowest. And this whole thing, this whole podcast today, this foreign policy, this jump ball, this 4-player jump ball, and this fight for Africa now, this bid for Africa now that's gonna go on. This was all preempted by this video, but also I find out that we have secret Chinese police stations here in America. If you don't know about this, just please go look it up. We have secret Chinese police stations here in America. One of which is here in Minnesota. Location unknown. But there's about 10 across the country. I think there's one in LA, there's one in San Francisco, there's one in New York City, there's one in Nebraska, there's one in Florida, I believe, no, Houston, Texas, maybe in Florida, and there's one here in Minnesota. I think there's 2 in New York City. But it's like 10 total that they know of, which is 10 out of the 100 that they have in countries all over the world. And these secret police stations are meant to intimidate and silence Chinese nationals that want to speak out or dissent against the regime there in China. This is totalitarianism. This is totalitarianism at its finest, at its peak totalitarianism. We're going to send a secret police station into another country to make sure that our citizens don't speak out against what we're doing here. And the scary part is deafening silence. Deafening silence from the federal government on these matters. The FBI, the DOJ, President Biden. Deafening silence about a hostile nation. I mean, imagine this. And again, this news over the last this is just the last 24 hours that the Philippines, the ships there in the Philippines are running into some conflict with the ships there, the Chinese ships, and there's a whole tension right now in the South China Sea with the Philippines and the Chinese. So this is all happening right now, okay? The South China Sea tension is right now. This isn't some fictitious Thucydides trapped on paper that's, being projected by academia intellectuals who observe the history of wars and conflicts and now make these geopolitical and theoretical assessments about the tension between us and China. It's on. It's on right now. And currently, although we are preparing ourselves to fight, if need be, to protect Taiwan, we allow there to be Chinese police stations in our country. We allow the Canadians to allow the Chinese to do military exercises on Canadian land. And y'all are wondering why I say we need to fucking annex Canada? Why in the fuck is Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government, whose allegiance is to the crown and the monarchy, on paper, okay? United States of America, we defected from the crown, independent. Canada, very much a part of the English Commonwealth, okay? And our defection got co-opted. We defected when we wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. By World War II, we were re-co-opted by the crown into a global economic fiat currency system where we paid to defend Europe, in effect. Imagine that. Imagine how smart the British have to be that we defected from the crown, became the shining beacon on the hill, the nation that had far exceeded anything that the Europeans could have imagined, that the European monarchs or, the traditional power structures there in Europe, that the crown could have imagined. We became something bigger and better and more unique than any European country could have imagined. And somehow, after the greatest war in history, that we came in and saved the Europeans from a total annihilation and defeat, somehow we end up footing the bill to protect Europe going forward. Smart motherfuckers behind that play. Smart motherfuckers, jujitsu, absorb people's energy. You got to know how to absorb. Like Bruce Lee said, you got to know when to crash and when to flow. Okay? The fucking British Empire is great at flowing. Okay, they knew when to crash and they knew when to flow. They crashed right up against Germany and said, there's no way we're going to let Germany be the political or economic hegemony here in Europe. So they crashed against Germany. They recruited America from the West. America comes in, they deal the final blow. And and then when America was, is laying in the aftermath and victory, then the European British monarchy creates now they're in the flow. They crashed and they flowed right into being posh, aristocratic, dildo cushion, okay, elites who got to get fat, who got fat on American tax money, protected by American tax money, protected by America's young people. We're going to let Justin Trudeau conspire with the Chinese to run military exercises north of our border? And you think that the American elites aren't in on that? Understand this. We got one sniff of poppy there in Afghanistan, and we laid Rolling Thunder for 15 fucking years. And I'm not saying that our troops didn't fight for a cause in the Middle East, and I'm not saying that our troops didn't sacrifice, and I'm not saying we shouldn't remember that sacrifice. But what I'm saying is the Afghanistan and Iraqi war were scams. I'm saying it. That doesn't disgrace or desecrate or denigrate the sacrifice of our troops. It's a clarity. It's a clarity. Like in other wars in the past, our troops are sometimes sacrificed by political and corporate elites who have no interest in the ideas that they say that we wage these wars on. We have to have the courage to have that clarity. We can't let the military-industrial complex puppet and propagandize troops that we've lost to justify their own corruption. That's what I saw with the Colin Kaepernick. Is Colin Kaepernick a Finocchio? Yeah. Is he a sellout? Yeah. Was he kneeling for other, maybe. I don't know. I'm not in the man's head. I don't really give a fuck. To me, if he was really about what he said he was about, he would have been speaking much more often, much more clear, and he wouldn't have signed the deals with the people we signed a deal with. You'll never catch me signing a deal with Walt Disney. Walt Disney doesn't give conservatives money in production deals, okay? You'll never catch me signing a deal with Nike without Nike clarifying their will or having them muzzle me and not be able to say or speak about certain things. Never. Would never happen. So in many ways, that delegitimizes Colin Kaepernick, 100%, 100%. But the shilling that took place for America and our military-industrial complex with regards to our national honor and the celebration of our national identity was some bullshit. Oh, that was some grade A level bullshit. That was the Uniparty coming together. And that's what we have here. And I said this last week, and I don't think people really, really understand. Or I want to say, I don't think the conservatives in the out there that are listening really want to accept that Satan isn't bipolar. Satan isn't polarized. As long as we continue to look at the world and the political landscape as being polarized, we're looking through a human lens. And I know it's a lot to ask people to look through any lens that isn't human. But the Bible gives us great indication that the metaphysical lens, the metaphysical dimensions. Satan doesn't play in polarity. He uses polarity. He himself is not polarized. He's unified in his agenda. He's unified in his purpose. He's unified in his desire. He's willing to use the uniparty. And that's why you hear many people who believe in God, family, and country stress the importance and stress the importance and the relevance of the uniparty. because it's not the polarity that's holding us back. It's not the polarity that's causing the problem. It's the false presentation of polarity that is entrenched and weaponized in uniparty politics. The corrupt status quo. The centrist is the most dangerous person in this country. The centrists are the most dangerous people in the world, the purveyors of a corrupt status quo. The fringes, the extremes, they're just there to create the desire, the welcoming of the corrupt status quo. And in the corrupt status quo, where we are headed, the conservatives will beg for martial law. Don't say you won't. Don't say, oh, I got my gun. Maybe you do. Maybe you're willing to use it. I get it. But there's a level of chaos you haven't seen yet, number one. Number two, a lot of you conservatives out there are lunchbox conservatives. You're lunchbox Republicans. What I mean lunchbox, I mean you talk about conservative Republican politics at lunch, at your job, with your little cohort of friends, as small talk. Or at your BPOU, or at your chicken wings and your chicken wings and coffee political gatherings. You're not unified. You're not organized. You're not ready to die on behalf of this country. Stop it. You're not willing to die on behalf of your freedoms. If you were, this country wouldn't have gotten to where it's gotten to. Don't talk about this huge revolt and you're gonna use your guns and you're willing to, and so on and so on. Don't talk about that as though it's just a given. Now, again, I said I think the spirit of freedom runs deep in the human person, and that ultimately, if tyranny befalled us, it wouldn't take long for people to rise up and decide to try and shake off those chains, that form of explicit tyranny. But it's not a fucking given. It is not a given. Because if we desired freedom, we have long since identified the corrupt institutions that preside over us that are tyrannical. But long identified them. Long identified them. The ultimate expression of uniparty tyranny is going to be welfare on one side and martial law on the other. Welfare on the left, martial law on the right. Give us food, give us security. Give us food, give us security. Uniparty. And you ask, what is it? How is this relevant? The fucking uniparty is allowing the Chinese government to do military exercises on our northern border right now, while we fight a war in the Ukraine against Russia for NATO riding up on Russia's border. But yet the Russians and the Chinese are going to work together now in an economic pact. And the French are saying we wouldn't mind a multipolar economic hegemony. I know you don't want to hear it. I know you don't like to hear it. We're getting played. I'm starting to think that they're all in on it together. All they're doing is what they're doing right now is they're trying to uphold the lies for all of the academic war horses, all of the historical war horses that remember the pacts and agreements that these divides and these narratives and these agreements were drawn upon. They're trying to preserve the lie for them. They're not preserving the lie for you. They're preserving the lie for the people who would hit the alarms and say, this is not what we agreed upon. This is not the way it was supposed to be. This is not the way it was written. That's what this whole deal is meant to convey. It's meant to convey a sense of coherence from our past, from our history. Post-World War II democratic world order, Vietnam, the nuclear treaty. All of these narratives have to be preserved in some form or fashion. That's what we're looking at. But it's my opinion, they're all in on it together. The elites here in America, the uniparty elites in America, the Finocchios there in Canada, the globalists there in Europe, China, Russia, they're all in on it together. That's where I'm at. Prove me wrong. Oh, you think because the Russians are willing to go to war in the Ukraine, that means they're not in on it? Really? Oh, you want to believe the narrative that Putin's fighting against Western globalism. Maybe he is. Maybe he is, but why is he doing a deal with China? Well, why is he doing what's the, if it's all about Christian values, if it's all about the Eastern Orthodox Church and these more conservative Russian values, why is he doing a deal with China? They're as anti-God as it gets. Is he getting fooled? Is he getting co-opted? Is he playing survival of the fittest? Is there moral hazard in that? The entire global landscape reeks of moral hazard. It reeks of man's narcissism. It reeks of a lack of spiritual guidance. And I like Alexander Dugin. I think he's a very, very brilliant political mind. But I don't like the prospect of Russia making any public and definitive alliances with China out of geopolitical necessity. It undermines their position in fighting the globalists. And it starts to look like the war between Russia and the European monarchies are intended to create the circumstance for a Eurasian political hegemony. And it's all aimed at America, really. Oh, you think the Europeans wouldn't sacrifice the Ukraine and the people in the Ukraine to a political agenda? You're talking about radical abortionists. These people are satanic. They don't give a shit about the people in the Ukraine. They don't give a shit about the Ukraine, okay? They're completely fine sacrificing every man, woman, and child in the Ukraine for their own political ambition. They're willing to collide atoms at light speed and recreate the Big Bang. You think they won't sacrifice 1 million people in the Ukraine? Are you kidding me? What delusional world do you live in? Do you get your politics with your French fries? You're reading the New York fucking Times that presupposes that the world is the way our elites say the world is. That's not the way the world is. Circling back to the conversation about the school shootings. And I saw Jon Stewart. Oh, Jon Stewart. Okay, the pinnacle, the apex of celebrity voices meant to give you politics with French fries. Okay. He was saying that, he was asking a question about gun rights and the Second Amendment, and he goes, he said, oh, so you're saying that the Second Amendment is a necessity, right? And that he tried to make basically what he did was he made the juxtaposition that transgender drag shows were not as dangerous to children as the Second Amendment was to children. This is how sophisticated the power structure is. This is how sophisticated the elite establishment is. This is how they're going to play on your empathy. This is how they're going to play on your emotional and spiritual and philosophical shallowness. He said the Second Amendment is basically a myth. Jon Stewart said the Second Amendment is a myth. Okay. It's fake. It's like not real. And he said that the drag shows are not as dangerous to children as the Second Amendment. No, duh. Oh, no, that's actually true. And all you conservatives out there who don't want to concede that, all you're doing is that's just a pussy move. Of course, the Second Amendment is more dangerous to children than drag shows at a physical and visceral level. No doubt. It's a price we pay. The Second Amendment and the danger it brings to the entire American public writ large is a price we pay for a greater idea of freedom, a greater concept of freedom. A greater concept of freedom, not juxtaposed to the things that happen here today in this country, although sometimes it is that. It's the idea of freedom that's juxtaposed to the theory of tyrannical government. And the Jon Stewarts of the world and the other people who oppose the Second Amendment, like China, want to pretend that the tyranny of government is never a possibility. But we know that that's a lie because the government in China is tyrannical and our government here is becoming more and more tyrannical. And the Democrat Party and their platform is becoming more and more tyrannical. So, of course, they would say, you don't need to worry about tyranny. That's a myth. You don't need to worry about tyranny. And don't use your theoretical or your hypothetical fear of tyranny. Tell us that we shouldn't put grown drag queens in front of kids and read to them at school. That's how sophisticated these people play. And all you liberal white women can't wait to get behind a Jon Stewart. I see you on social media clapping. Yep, the guns are more dangerous than the drag shows. No, principally, if we get rid of the guns and we let the government be the only ones with guns and we let drag queens be the only ones controlling the government, then you won't have a choice whether or not your kid is exposed to a man dressing up like a woman with a white woman's wig and a penis. And not only having a penis, but shaking his penis in front of your kid's face. That's why we have the Second Amendment. That's why the Second Amendment is important. And that's why the dangers that come along with it are a price we pay. And now we all have to consider the price we pay. Not just when it comes to the Second Amendment or drag shows. We have to consider the price we pay to be a nation. We have to consider the price we pay for citizenship. We have to consider the price we pay for this entire idea we call America. There's a price to be paid. That's why I said what I said about reparations. There's a price to be paid. There's a price to be paid whether you want to or not. You're going to pay the price. And I love it. I love it when the Tanner, the middle American white person's first response, their gut response, their knee-jerk response to reparations is, I'm not paying. You're not paying. You're already fucking paying. What kind of fucking scam you running on yourself? You're already paying. You're paying for the rise of fucking China is what you're paying for. And it does say something sort of racial if you're weirdly willing to pay for the rise of China, but not to repatriate and renationalize black people in this country. That's fucking weird. Tanner, would you agree? Tanner agrees. We're gonna get Tanner's mic on here next week so you can hear the commentary back and forth. I think that'd be a good element, Tanner, if you're up to that. But it's a little fucking strange that you're willing to do. I'm not gonna pay. I'm not gonna pay. Yeah, you're paying. You're paying the CCP. Now you can make an argument that you would like to stop paying that and not pay. Yeah, right. Okay. Great. When? How? There's no real tangible plan to stop paying. And I said this on Whitlock, and I put this reparations proposal out there. And for those of you who haven't heard it, my proposal was that we don't pay any cash because we don't have any cash. The government's in debt. We actually don't have any cash. But the Federal Reserve has $9 trillion on its debt sheet that they completely made up on their own. Right? Okay, there's debt that we actually incurred that went to tangible line items, and then there's a debt that the Federal Reserve just printed, and they want us to pay back with interest. This is what happens when you have a privatized Federal Reserve. Okay, $9 trillion on the Fed balance sheet, straight Fugazi money, okay? Straight fake money. Okay, not even though that the entire system is really a Ponzi scheme, but this $9 trillion is like what the guy from the Power of the Fed, Age of Easy Money, said was we went from a 3% GDP in the financial sector to a 6% GDP, and that's just us being leeches. That's us just inflating our own little 3% extra that we want to take off the top. That's what the Fed did. 9% on the debt sheet that they just created, and they want us to pay it back with interest. They want you to pay. Remember, you said you're not going to pay. I guarantee you fucking pay that. And there's a sort of cuckery to that, right? When you're willing to pay for the Fed, but you're not willing to pay for your own national sovereignty. My proposal was that we address the manufacturing crisis in this country by allowing African Americans who were descendants of slaves to opt in to this program that would build cities around the country, like now, dire situation. Matter of national security, executive order. Executive order that we're going to build manufacturing epicenters to offset the dependency on an explicit national enemy like China and their regime, the CCP. That was my proposal. And that in these manufacturing cities, you may have a piece of land. You may have a piece of land that you don't have to pay property taxes on. But remember, my initial 3 pillars are no taxes for everybody. So your taxes aren't going to go to pay reparations. I know you couldn't conceptualize that because you're such a fucking cuck for the tax scam in this country that a land without taxes, you can't square it. Cuck motherfuckers. No, we agree to be taxed. We're willing to pay. Right? But you said you weren't willing to pay, right? Remember, you're not willing to pay. You're not willing to pay reparations, but you'll pay 50% to a corrupt federal government in taxes that they give to welfare anyway. And not only does white tax money go to black welfare, black tax money goes to white welfare. The two-way split. Oh, they got you interweaved and you know, they covered all the bases. Now black people are paying for the welfare and government dependency and enslavement of white people, as well as vice versa. But the white people in America are the ones that say, we're already paying reparations, it's welfare. Well, let me be clear with what I'm saying. No, you're paying a price. And that price is being described in a way politically that justifies welfare as a sort of cultural penance that would be in alignment with reparations, but really it's not. And this is where we got to be careful with how we use the language and our meticulousness, the carefulness with which we go about defining and using words. Welfare is not reparations. Welfare is taking common working class people's money and keeping a certain group of people on federal government dependency in perpetuity. And they plan to keep them on welfare in perpetuity, black people, and they plan to expand it to everybody else. And not only that, they plan to use the dependency on federal money. They plan to use the welfare state to slowly and subconsciously ensconce the fealty to Democrat politicians and votes. This is how they play. This is how Satan plays. It's not about black people needing money or housing or clothing. It's about black people being conditioned and brainwashed into a mentality that says, I'm not a nation of shopkeepers. I'm not a citizen. I'm a permanent ward of the state. And the only way to eat, the only way to survive is to continue to expand the federal government and continue to vote for the party that will expand the federal government. That's the Democrat Party. Period. Now, is that reparations? No. Because reparations, for anybody who would actually be genuinely invested in such a word, would actually be trying to repair something that would better the nation. Where the sum total of that policy or that act or that incentivization would actually better the country and the overall quality of life and value of citizenship for everyone. Putting black people on welfare doesn't benefit everyone. Putting white people on welfare doesn't benefit everyone. It may help them in the short term, but it's only helping them in the short term to keep them enslaved. And the elites know that there is a policy path, there is a policy prescription that could genuinely help everyone. This is why Steve Bannon said, where was George Floyd on the day that he died? Why wasn't he buying his second lake house on Memorial Day weekend and celebrating from a manufacturing job that he had? And maybe George Floyd wouldn't have, we can't use him specifically because we don't know if he would have had a manufacturing job or kept a manufacturing job. We're talking per capita here. Keep up, motherfuckers. Keep up. I know you want to cuck your way out of here. I know you want to cuck your way out of here, but there's no way out. There's no cucking your way out. You're going to fucking pay. You're going to pay one way or another. The question is, how are you going to pay? Who are you going to pay? You're going to be given a choice to pay. And in that choice to pay, do you want to pay the CCP or would you like to invest in your own nation? You invest in the CCP goes to Africa and tells Africa, we'll give you airports for fealty. And we all know that's how the scam is working. That's the funny thing here. Everybody knows that's how the scam is working. America sent money to China. China has now used their theft of intellectual property, the weaponization of their labor force versus through human rights violations, their reduction of price through the labor force. They used all of that now to create and foster an anti-American sentiment with other people that they want to collaborate with, use on the international stage. And you mean to tell me our elites don't see that? I'm 30 fucking years old and I figured that out in 20 fucking minutes. It is easy. Duh. Why do we keep fucking sending our money to a country that wants to destroy us? What kind of fucking scam is this? The only thing you can deduce is that our elites who collaborate and conspire with them, they want to see us destroyed too. They've been promised the kickback. They've been promised a payment. But you'll pay for that. That you'll pay. Strange. Again, I want to go back and highlight that the reparations proposal, you don't have to pay anything. Oh, well, land redistribution never works. Your land's already being redistributed. You pay property taxes, you homeowners. You pay property taxes, and guess where your tax money goes? Oh, it goes to the CCP. Oh, you think it goes to your public schools? Oh, well, they teach your kids to cut their dicks off, but you'll pay for that. You'll pay for teachers, for white liberal Marxist women, to teach your son to cut his fucking penis off with the equity of the property in your home, your castle, your home. You'll pay to teach your own kid to cut his fucking penis off with the equity of the property that your home sits on. But you say you won't pay. Oh, you're going to fucking pay. You're going to pay what they tell you to pay. You're going to pay what they force you to pay. At the tip of a spear, you're going to fucking pay. The question is, what are you going to pay? And the only reason I brought that up is because, again, the reparations one, that was my proposal, okay? My proposal was the reparations package. We should, in effect, create these opportunities, take the Fed, squeeze the Fed. That type of shit will get you killed. Pray for me, you guys. Squeeze the fucking Fed. Squeeze the international banking cartel, because the international banking cartel is relying upon the military. That's why when Gaddafi said they should go to one African currency, they used the military to go clip him out. Just like when JFK said that we should fight against the tyranny of the Fed, they used the military to clip him out. The military is the strong arm of the international banking cartel. There's 3 players here. There's a 4-player jump ball, but when you talk about the structures, the institutions, there's 3 structures in the world. You have the international banking cartel. They sit right in the middle, right? These are the money changers. It's very common, simple idea. And it's not just Jews. Oh, the Medicis, they're in France. Oh, they had a great bank as well. Oh, there's banksters. The Swiss. Oh, the Swiss are great bankers too. Don't get me. They're all in on it. There's a lot of people in on it. Okay. You got the international banking cartel. You have 2 opposing forces. You have a more globalist, woke, scientific, cultural force, right? And this group, this side of technology, it's 2 sides of technology, right? Because technology has emerged as the greatest mechanism for industry, and the banking cartel is predicated on industry. Simple fucking equation. It's a battle of 2 different forms of technology at the top. You have the military-industrial complex form of technology, and you have the cultural surrender form of technology. Welfare, martial law. That makes sense, Tanner? Welfare, martial law. Welfare is using technology to clone your fucking chickens, to clone your fucking food, to give you a 15-minute city, to give you 1,000 vaccines, to give you a central bank digital currency, to give you dopamine, to give you drugs and video games. That's using science to get you to voluntarily give over your freedom and voluntarily give the control of resources over to the elite. Martial law is the more bloody cowboy way, right? And right now here in America, in the West, in the world, we have two different factions, two different clans of people. We have the welfare technocrats that say the only way forward is to bring technology to a point where we can make everybody permanent wards of a global governance. But you still have this faction of cowboys who want the military industrial complexes of the world, who still want to fucking shoot it out, right? That's some of what you're seeing there in the Ukraine, right? Military industrial complex says, now who wins and loses, who lives or dies, who gets access to the resources should still be determined by who can fight a war the best. But you got your other technocrats over here saying, no. Why does everybody want to fight these wars and get shooting and bloody? Why? We don't need to do that. These people will give up their freedom voluntarily. And neither one is any less satanic than the other. That's the misconception around polarity that has obscured the human mind, the modern American citizen, and the modern free person or common person all over the world. That's the misconception of polarity that has obscured people's minds in the modern era. As you hear welfare technocrats and military industrial complex technocrats, and you think we got to decide which one is the lesser evil. They're both evil and satanic as fuck. One of them says, let's shoot it out right here today. May the best man win. The other one says, you know what? I'd rather you die slow on a video game in a virtual reality, okay? I'd rather you die slow in the metaverse, right? That's what we're looking at here. And I say it again. The two forms of the two springboards for global dominance, the two springboards for globalism are welfare and martial law. And at a point, the great fear should be at a point, the two will converge. And you started to see that with COVID. And I want people to understand the times we're living in. And maybe this episode gets removed because I say this, but you started to see the convergence, the testing of a coming together, of a kumbaya, of a merger of the military industrial complex technocrats and the welfare technocrats. You started to see them to test some type of equation where they can work together. Martial law, welfare. See, reparations doesn't give people welfare. Reparations that I propose would make you a ward of the state. It makes you it gives you a vested interest. It makes you an interested party in the preservation of a land that you call a nation that you're a citizen of, that you're a stakeholder in. What's the fastest way to endear a man to his nation? Through his God or through his home? Well, many of you fucking uniparty cucks have already given away with the God. Done. He's out. You better get right about this land piece. Oh, and the federal government owns a bunch of land. We're not coming to take you, the common American workers' land, to redistribute it to black people, you fucking morons. You actually were under the auspices that a wide majority of American land is owned by the American people. You actually were living under the thinking that the majority of America's land is owned by the common American person. You don't own your house. The government owns your house. The bank owns your house. The American military owns your house. the high the high priests of science and academia, they own your house. They say what will be done with your land. Okay? You don't own shit. The common American citizen has come to be okay with the notion of not owning shit. But you want to protect against the reconciliation of a nation and the reconcretization of a nation and our ideas and our sovereignty and our national honor through a thing like reparations on face value, knee jerk, because some fucking Pinocchio on Fox News told you that reparations is this or is that. I'm not trying to shove reparations down your throat. These are the same people that would be opposed to a no tax. Let somebody run on a no taxes platform and let's see how many Republicans actually vote for him. Do you think I'll be able to get through the next primary cycle here in Minnesota, in the state of Minnesota, on a no taxes platform? How popular do you think that would be with Republicans? No taxes. Zero taxes. Let's be reasonable. There'll be a few things that we got to still deal with, infrastructure, and But then again, Pete Buttigieg says that infrastructure is racist, right? That's not the type of reparations we're talking about, people. We know how it's been weaponized. The question is, what's the fastest way to endure a man to his national identity and give him some national honor? You give him ownership in it. And oh, by the way, I believe, in my reparations proposal, if you're a descendant from Civil War veterans on either side, you'll get reparations as well. Let's go back to the inflection point in this nation. Let's go back to when the Crown co-opted the identity of America and split people along two dividing lines, slavery and states' rights. They gave the Union slavery as a righteous cover to fight, and they gave the Confederacy states' rights as a righteous cover to fight. Go ahead. Knock yourselves out. Either way, we win. That's how Satan plays. That's how Satan plays in war games. Go ahead and knock yourselves out. Either way, I win. Because your leaders don't see ahead. Your leaders don't understand. Your leaders are they're bogged down, they're burdened. They're burdened by the people who they seek to lead. And that's really what it is. Do I think Abraham Lincoln didn't understand the prospect of states' rights? No, of course he did. The question is, could he get it the fuck through to you people? That was the question. And that is often the question of leadership. Can Donald Trump just come right out and say what the fuck it is, and you believe it, and you be willing to sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed to move in the right direction? That's what I'm learning as a coach. The biggest hurdle in coaching young people or training young people in sports, the biggest hurdle is, can you tell them exactly what the truth is and then be able to accept it and respond and embrace what needs to happen? That's the real trick. And for some players, for whatever reason, you can never just tell them exactly what it is and them accept it. They question it. They question themselves. They question their ability to do what you tell them to do. They question their ability to understand it. An epidemic of self-doubt. That's what Satan puts in people. The epidemic of self-doubt is rampant. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe that we could go back to the American Civil War, a time where we like to really shy away from. We don't believe we could go back there and identify how we were tricked and reconcile it ex post facto. I believe we can. Maybe I just got 10-pound fucking balls. And if I could, I would give any spare pounds, any spare weight in my balls to everybody watching. But it's only one sack here, okay? It's only one sack here sitting on this chair. Okay, I cannot. There's only so much I can give before I have no balls myself. All right? I'm trying to transfer, right, the weight of the sack to you ideologically. We have to have the courage. This is the darkest and most dangerous time, and it calls for the utmost courage. And it's not about reparations. It's about taxes. It's about term limits. I said, who the fuck is voting for Mitch McConnell in Kentucky? The American Jubilee, the CCP. This is the greatest threat on our doorstep. And it's not just the CCP. It's the CCP co-opting all these other nations into an anti-American sentiment. And it's happening right now. And to all you sellout cuck motherfucking Americans out there, primarily you black bourgeoisie grandstanders, where the fuck do you think you're going? When this nation collapses, like you so often like to predict, when this nation collapses, where do you think you're going? What do you think life looks like for you then? Consider that. Consider what life would look like there in China. And right now, we need to draw a line. We need to take this country back and we need to draw a line. Freedom, tyranny. Very clear line. We don't need the Chinese. We don't need anybody. We need a nation with borders that we teach our young people to defend because of the idea of freedom, that we train our young people to defend because of the idea of freedom. The unique and diverse population that America is, we teach that diverse population, we galvanize that diverse population along the lines of freedom, not capitalism or corporatocracy or Marxism or Darwinism. Freedom, free will, granted to you, inalienable rights granted to you by the Creator. Freedom, that's got to be the rallying cry. Freedom or tyranny. The line is drawn. The question is, are we going to continue to let our nation be led by people who fundamentally oppose freedom? Every time you see a news story break that the CCP is being allowed to walk around the United States of America through official government operations, or they're in Canada, or they're in Mexico, precursors in Mexico for fentanyl. We got secret police stations from China here in America, and in Canada, they're doing military drills. Are you kidding me? And you guys want us to believe it's about democracy, social justice, and environmentalism? Who would believe you fucking morons? I'll tell you who. You out there. You out there who are too scared to see the reality, the desperation, the situation we're in. We have got to win in 2024. We have got to upset in 2024. We have to go into deep blue states and bring a ministry of truth, a ministry of truth into the belly of the beast in 2024. And it starts today. Get to work today. You don't want to pay reparations? Well, guess what? You'll pay for it in blood. Your women and children will pay for it. Your women will pay for it at the grocery store. Your children will pay for it when they send us off to some pseudo proxy war. You'll pay for it through the inflation of goods and your property taxes or whatever else. You'll pay. Oh, you will pay. But what we could do is put a stop to the whole game. Pull out. We're out of the United Nations. Out. Sorry. We're out. We're out of NATO. We should pull out of NATO. Let NATO bring in whoever they want to. They could bring in Lithuania, Estonia, Bratislava, Dildo, Aphonia. I don't care what Onias and Estonias, and they could bring them all in. Bring anybody in. Bring in Dildo Candyland. Get them too. You can bring them too. We're out. We're going to get this nation together. We're going to make this nation sovereign. We're going to secure this nation's borders. We're going to expand the footprint of this nation's borders to make sure that any nearby threats don't undermine the security of this nation. We're going to go back and reconcile. We're going to go back and genuinely reconcile. Great deal. It's a great deal. You don't have to pay. You don't have to pay $1, and we're going to empower black people to finally have a stake in this nation, finally be able to call this nation home. Because you're not going back to Africa, black people, because the Africans are already being resettled by the Chinese. So guess what? The African nations, they didn't hold any no open door for you to be able to come back to Africa and own land, for you to be able to come back to Africa. In fact, the only way you can move back to Africa and own land, recently speaking, is if you had what? American money. Because the money transfers to African money in such a disproportionate way. A man who's rich with a man who's moderately wealthy with American money is extremely wealthy with African money and African money. That was the only way that you were getting back in Africa, with some land and some wealth. There's no programs in Africa for you to just pop back on over to Africa based on being a descendant of slaves and have some affluent, repaired life, reparated life. That's not real. You're not going anywhere. Stop. Cut the shit. White people out there, cut the shit. You're already paying. You're not even going to pay in this plan. If you have the gut reaction, knee jerk, no reparations. Oh my God, I'm not paying. Yeah, you're paying all right. In the reparations proposal, you actually wouldn't be paying. In this proposal, you're going to pay for your own fucking enslavement. Let's just cut the shit. Let's just cut the divide. Let's just cut the bullshit and get down to business. Get down to business. We all need to do. We all are going to have to pay a price now, and we all may have to pay a price in helping rebuild this country's manufacturing base. And the first thing is we have to get habituated around the idea of labor and work. If we hadn't lost that in the first place, we wouldn't have been underbid and undermined by the low price economic warfare that the Chinese have waged against us, that we opted into, that we paid for. We paid for their rise. But that was because of our loss of sense of the importance of labor. And it came from the Civil War, because labor became associated with slavery. Labor and slavery are not the same. Getting a deal that's not adequate, being unfairly compensated for your work, is what we should resist. But that's happening here today. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. Got to buy tires from somebody. Again, help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement. That's what the establishment is going to take from you. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Don't die a jerk off. The fight continues, and as always, Godspeed.